Hello, my name's Oliver Blumer, and I'm the host for ODYSSEY. ODYSSEY will bring you, with each episode, an interview with two people in the trans community, trans queer community, two-spirit community, or within the umbrella of transgender, transsexual. You will hear from Jazsmyne Kelli, who we will interview, and you'll get to hear more about her personal story. And the second one will be myself, as I thought you might want to know a little bit about me as your host on ODYSSEY.
Learning about what transgender was.
There's a difference between gender and sex.
Trans experience.
Create my own masculinity.
Understand myself.
Nothing was going to stop me from becoming the person that I wanted to be.
Map out what my transition means for me and what that will look like.
The types of relationships that I wanted to have.
Being comfortable in my own skin.
Kind of being aware of what being trans was.
It's about how you feel.
Kind of figuring out who I was.
Two-spirit.
So that we support and love one another.
I am genderqueer.
I identify as a trans man.
Be inclusive of every single person. When I first realized I was different, I was probably about maybe 3 or 4 years old. And I just realized that watching some TV shows and watching, I don't know, TV shows, I guess, men were more attractive to me than the women were. But I always loved the way the women looked, and I loved the clothes and the makeup and the hair of the women. And my mother was a singer when I was growing up, when we were growing up. I'm the oldest of 4 children. And I used to watch her get ready for her shows. She sang with a band for 13 years. And I'd watch her do her makeup. I'd watch her do her hair. I would watch her lay out outfits to get ready for, and she had tons of shoes, so I would always watch her get ready. And it's pretty ironic because that's what I do today. I do the same exact thing that I saw her doing when I was coming up. But I think the first time that I realized I was different, I was probably about somewhere between 3.5, maybe 4 years old.
Well, the question about when we have discovered that we are transgender or gender variant is a question that is really a question coming up in the 2000s years. They weren't something we talked about in the 1990s or the 1980s. In fact, the word transgender is a very new word, considering. So when I found that I was first aware of my alignment with myself, that is, who I was as a person, didn't seem to align with how others saw me in, say, my family or in social aspects, were basically when I was about 3. This was in the 50s. It was right after World War II, and there was quite a strong presence of gender bias, both for women and for people of other ethnicities. And men, white men, really dominated all the workforce coming back from World War II and getting their jobs. And women were pushed basically back into the kitchen and out of the factories where they were working for some time during the war, doing men's jobs. So I grew up in a time where it wasn't cool to dress anything other than the gender that you were given at the time you were born, and the doctor looked at you and said, girl or boy. So I was forced into a contract of what was basically found when I was born, based on genitalia.
I didn't make it public to the world until I was an adult. But growing up, my mother was the youngest daughter of a minister. So we grew up in a very, very, we grew up in a Christian household. We grew up in a very religious, I guess is what you can call it, what I could call it back then. And a lot of things you were taught definitely was taught that that type of lifestyle was not acceptable. And so you didn't tell anyone, you didn't make that aware. I was always myself and who I was, but I just never made it verbal that I was a different person. So I definitely suppressed that for a very long time, verbally anyway.
But at 3, I will point out, one doesn't know what their sexual orientation is. They do know, perhaps, most people are aligned with, in their mind, how they want to present or express their gender. And so I always wanted to be a boy. I knew I was a boy. So that was at 3. Then I would have to say that as I saw what happened around me, if I decided that I wanted to express myself in a male persona, wear boys' clothes, and I looked around and I wasn't able to wear them, but other boys were, the way that I was looked at and perceived, again, by family and friends, was that it just didn't align with who I was in my mind. And that became something, being firstborn, being very aware of what parents like to see and what they don't like to see. I knew that if I acted out, in those days we called them tomboys, if I acted out on that, it only worked for me for a very short time. But when puberty kicked in, parents and society, teachers would not support that I would be wearing, for instance, boys' clothing. And so there was this automatic kind of, you know what, this isn't socially acceptable, you're going to be ostracized. Then I pushed all of that information that I had about alignment with my brain and not being in the right flesh or persona of my body, or what I would like to say, avatar, is that I had to oppress, suppress, and act out being somebody who I wasn't, to the point where there was shame, there was guilt, much the same that some lesbian and gay, bisexual people feel.
Early in my years, I didn't know what it was called. I didn't know what it was. But as I was growing up and I was the older I got, the more when I was in the 6th grade, and I was realizing that I was having to have fights every single day. Junior high school, every day, I was being called, faggot this and you're gay. And so I realized then that, yeah, I knew I was different, but there was no way that I could necessarily admit to being the person that I truly was. I never hid who I was. I just never was verbal about it. Now my actions definitely spoke for me. So that was nothing that I did or tried to necessarily hide. But what I thought I would do was I would excel in things that I knew that I was good in, to take that focus and attention off me so people could say, oh, well, you're really, really good, you're really good in track, or you're really good in choir, or you're really good in this, academics. And so I tried to make sure that I made that the focus of everything.
So I lived the life in the avatar of a female, but in actuality, I was actually male. And so progressing through my life, I found that I just had to play this game to the point where I felt like I was pretty much on automatic pilot. I did the things I was supposed to do, I achieved the things that I wanted to do, all to make myself look better in other people's eyes, always knowing that there was this other part of me that couldn't express.
Of course, as I got older, yes, I did identify with being a gay male versus being transgender. I didn't know what transgender was. I knew how I always felt, and I knew what I saw, and I knew where I wanted to go. I just didn't know what path to take and how to get there. And it all became kind of clear when I started experimenting with doing drag shows. This gave me opportunity to do something that I was very good at, and learn to be very good at a very quick time. But at the same time, being able to express my feminine side. Even at that point, I still didn't know how to completely cross over and, get to that particular side. I was at the age of 55 before I was able to
come to some kind of awareness without all the filters and all the mental structures I had put into place to fit into society.
When I first recognized that I was transgender is after being a female impersonator for a couple of years and realizing that I wanted to go a step further than just being on stage and recognized as Jazsmyne on stage. I also want to be Jazsmyne off stage. The average drag queen or female impersonator is a person who puts on the makeup, who puts on the drag and puts on the whole illusion to enter the stage and complete that task or whatever it is that they're doing. You know, be an entertainer. After that, everything comes off. I realized I didn't want anything to come off.
However, I was attracted to cis females, and I found that there was this word for that early in my 20s, and that was called lesbian. But I never really felt that I fit there either. So I'm one of those generations that tried to fit into some modicum of a social presence, even though in the 60s and 70s and 80s that wasn't exactly an easy place to be either.
When I was finished doing the show, I wanted to be beautiful. I wanted to walk around and I wanted to mingle and I wanted to carry over that identity. And then I would go out, you know, there would be times where I wasn't performing, that I wasn't doing shows but I just wanted to go out. I just wanted to dress out, be beautiful and go out. And I felt so confident in who I was at that time, even though I didn't know anything about the hormones or I didn't know anything about testosterone blockers or anything that girls take in order to, you know, start their transition. I didn't know anything about implants or anything like that. So, but I knew where I wanted to go and just didn't know how to get there.
So at 55, I began what we call medical transition, and medical transition is different for everybody. Not all transgender people have to have surgery, and I'll repeat that. Not all transgender people will get surgery or even take hormones. And I think that's important to express because most people think, or they'll ask the question, which is really socially unacceptable unless you know the person. They will ask you, have you had the surgery? Well, quite frankly, that's a very personal question. And I personally don't answer it until I'm in an educational type of forum, and then I expect to be asked those kinds of things that will bring clarity and understanding to who transgender people are. At 55, it's a lot harder to transition. At 55, in general, taking hormones are not the same as if I was 17 or 20 or 30 even, the way testosterone works on an older body.
I started doing some research and I started, even when I was transitioning, the internet wasn't as accessible as it is today. But I had girlfriends who had transitioned and I basically interviewed them, had conversations with them, sisters of mine that have transitioned and have been very successful in doing so. And I just asked around and I was like, you know, girl, how do you get hormones? Where do you get those from? How do you find a doctor that will see you, you know, someone that will look at you and say that they're convinced that this is the lifestyle that you should be leading? Because sometimes there's doctors that won't see girls because they don't feel comfortable in maybe writing a prescription. You know, that's a serious step that you have to take. You have to realize you're altering your body. And you're also altering your mind as well. So those are, you know, some things you have to definitely be sure that you're ready for.
For me, my transition was going to take place in two ways. One, I would have what was known as top surgery, which is removing the breast tissue. And two, taking hormone therapy, or oftentimes called cross-hormone therapy, meaning different than or across from what your body has been making in the body that you have.
And after doing that and after realizing that there were resources and that there were doctors in our community that I could make an appointment and say, hey, I need to be on hormones. hey, I need, I feel like I've always felt like I'm a female, and they can identify with that, and they're familiar enough with that. And so that's kind of how I went. 27. 27 is when I took my first hormone shot. I was impatient. Now, mind you, before I was even able to go to a doctor, I found out about the black market hormones. Places you can go and you can just pretty much, you could buy hormones over the counter, no questions asked. They're not the safest thing, and I never would suggest anyone do that, but that was the way that I got started. I was very impatient. I didn't feel like anything was happening. I don't know what I expected. Maybe I expected, I don't know, this maybe tingling feeling all over, a sensation all over my body, or for me to all of a sudden wake up the next day with some double Ds, or I don't know what I thought, but nothing actually happened that I could remember. However, once I was consistent, and once I put myself on a regular schedule, a hormone regimen, so to speak, I could start feeling, differences and changes in my body. I could feel my breasts developing. They're very sensitive. My areolas start spreading. I just got this real tingle, and I did get the tingling sensation that I was thinking that I would get the first time. I started gaining weight, and I felt like I was going through puberty as a young female. I just felt like I was going through puberty. Yes, my attitude was kind of all over the place. My hormones were all over the place, I should say. I was emotional at times, seems like for no reason. I could watch a movie and probably end up crying at the end of the movie, somewhere in the beginning of the movie, because, I was just that emotional. But those were the things that I was told to expect. And so those were the things that I, just had to endure, because nothing was going to stop me from becoming the person that I wanted to be.
One of the questions that we're often asked, or as I'm asked as a transgender person or person of trans experience, is what did your family do? How did your family feel about this? What did they do? How did you tell your family? So for me, I had already come out to my parents in my 20s as being a lesbian. Now, they weren't all that surprised, but we're a very, very tight family, very loving family. And it's not about tolerance, it's about they love me no matter what. They want me to be happy.
I stayed away from my family for about a year, as far as, seeing my family visually. I talked to my mom, I talked to my brothers all the time, and that wasn't an issue, but because I felt that I didn't want any distractions when I was going through the transition. And what I mean by distractions, I mean, I didn't want to hear any opinions from anyone. I didn't need anything to deter me from the path that I was trying to go.
Now, my father, when he heard the story that I would be transitioning medically, I said, "But Dad, what's going through your mind right now?" And he said, "Well, son, daughter, I don't know, what do I call you? Do I tell people I have 3 sons or 2 sons and a daughter?" Now, my parents live in a high-rise full of people over 55. And I basically said to him, "Dad, you can tell anybody you want in this building, just 5 minutes later, they're not going to know. So you can say whatever comes easy to you." Then a little later, he had this look on his face and he said, "Well, I guess it's okay. I guess I understand. But don't get a mohawk." Now you have to understand they live in Seattle, okay, grunge city, mohawk, goth, the whole thing. And this is what they see in the street all the time because they live in the area, the Capitol Hill area, which is an LGBT area. So it was quite funny how he kept kind of looking at looks and how I would look.
And I felt like if maybe I saw family members or during my transition, they wouldn't quite understand. I wanted them to see a more of a finished product because I think that would have allowed them to be a lot more accepting. And they can kind of look at you and go, okay, well, yeah, I see where this is going, versus me in my early stages where I was just maybe at the androgynous stage where, you know, people would see me and go, well, no, I can't tell if that's a guy, that's a girl, or if it even mattered. But I just wanted to make sure that I wasn't distracted. So with my family, that's what I did.
And of course, when you change from male to female or female to male, your family, your closest family, has a very hard time with it sometimes because they have to go through a bereavement stage where you are not the person that they had known, which of course we are, but the physical aspect changes. And they do feel that perhaps they're being abandoned, perhaps, they just don't understand. It's hard for them to wrap their brain around that situation.
However, when I did become very, very comfortable, I resurfaced, and I've always had a great family. And it's not that I didn't think my family would be 100% supportive. I guess that was a little selfish part of me that wanted to make sure that I was at a certain status or at a certain level whenever I did resurface and come back around to my family. So, but they're very supportive, 100%. My mother is always at any events that I'm involved in when she can be. My family is very supportive, and so I have a really good family. I'm blessed to have that. Not a lot of girls can say that, but I'm definitely blessed.
So I have two younger brothers, and I have my wife, who as of today is our 5th anniversary, and she was a blessing. She was able to give me the strength and the beautiful gift of listening and trying to understand and being present for me and being aware and being compassionate. And I couldn't ask for anything better than that. We were perceived as we were giving the perception that we were a lesbian couple. For many years, we were in the lesbian community and we were seen as lesbians. So it just took place that when we got together, everyone in the community said, no, there are two lesbians. Once I began my transition, she began to be questioned. So when we transition with family and with couples, what we find is that everybody transitions with you. They might not choose to want to understand or go into the depth of it, but that was something that I had to take on when I came out to my parents for the second time as wanting to begin medical transition from female to male.
Yeah, my boyfriend at the time, of course, and this is something that I guess we can get into later, but I've always dated men who were, I don't put jackets or labels on people because I don't want people necessarily doing that to me, but the men that I've always dated usually were, if you just had to put them in a category, heterosexual to bi. They usually dated women or women like me. So he definitely had no problem. He was very supportive of that. He was very attracted to that. So, like I said, the only problem that he may have had was, my attitude was a little flippant at times, and, which he understood that because he knew that just came with the territory as far as taking hormones.
So personally for me, depression was probably throughout my life, but sort of what I would call subacute, and it did affect how I interacted with people. And most recently, being a physician myself, I said, I don't like the way things are going here. I've had a number of surgeries and I'm not feeling like I'm connected to myself. So I sought professional help, not because I'm transgender, but because I was dealing with issues that had built up over time and sort of kept me in like a straitjacket, not because I'm crazy, but because I guess another way to do it is I had like lead boots on. and it kept me from moving forward in some parts of my life. So I think that those are issues that I have dealt with, moving on and learning who I am and this new person that I am, and the fact that I have the ability to be even more than what I was before, and I can make choices around that. And not a lot of people get that choice. And so I would have to say that is an ongoing journey I'm on, and I'm learning more from it. And because of that, I feel like I'm being helpful to other people.
My biggest struggle was just being confident in the person that I was, and not worrying about what other people thought about me. There'd be some times where I get on the train and I think that people were looking at me in a way because I got spooked, which means, you know, people can catch your real gender. That's what spook means. Or I thought people were looking at me and maybe saying things negative about me. And I learned very quickly that that was not always the case. I used to catch an attitude. I might get on the train or get on the bus and somebody may look like they were saying something about me, and I'd turn around. Of course, I was younger. And I'd turn around and I'd say something like, "I'm sorry, did you say something? What did you know?" And I realized a lot of the times people were either complimenting my shoes or something I had on, or saying that they liked my makeup, or that they liked my hair. Now, there were times where people, you know, were making comments, but I was always so defensive because I wasn't yet comfortable in my own skin. So I wasn't accepting who I was. And I had to sit down and actually realize that how many other people are seeing my insecurities when I act this way? So if people are seeing my insecurities, then what that does is that opens me up for people to be able to pick out things and get to me. But if I close that book, and if I become a confident woman that I want to be, people pretty much accept me, regardless, whether they know that I'm transgendered or whether they don't. That doesn't even become an issue anymore. You know, it's how you present yourself. It's the respect that you demand and command from people. So my biggest struggle was, you know, being able to be comfortable with myself. Once I was able to achieve and accomplish that, it's been pretty much smooth sailing from there.
One of the triumphs, I think, there's several. There is a lot of joy in this. It's not a lot of angst and grinding of teeth and wondering who you're going to be when you grow up and go through puberty. For me, that was always an exciting time. It's always an exciting time. And I would have to say I'm probably about 19 in my puberty level right now, at the age of 59. So I have a lot of filters, though, that help me not go down the road that somebody who's 19 might be going down. Triumphs are the ability to make friends and an extended family and reach out and save lives. For me, this has been a journey that I never expected, only because I chose, as a trans person, to be what we call non-disclosing, meaning that I am out there as a trans man in the community. I can do this work, and for me, that's a huge triumph. And a little story around that is, when you've saved a life, when you never even knew you did, and you find out later because someone connected with me and found out that they had the same thoughts, they had the same feelings, they felt alone and isolated, and sometimes their behavior and acting out was really not being aligned with their soul and their heart, and being present and aware and compassionate with that person at exactly the time the universe wanted me to. That was a saving of lives, and it happens weekly in my personal life, and that to me is the greatest triumph for me.
Being able to share my gifts with people, and if you know just a little bit about me, and for me to make that statement, you're just going to automatically assume that I'm talking about the gift of singing. And I'm not just talking about that. I have a lot of amazing gifts. and some that are just like being revealed to me. I'm a very spiritual person. I'm not a religious person. And I think the difference between that, I think religion is a structure, and it is full of rules and things that you should do and that you shouldn't do. I'm a spiritual person, and I think spirituality comes from within and being in tune to your life and your purpose here, and being in tune to the Creator and what your purpose here on earth is. And one of my gifts, I don't necessarily know how to title it, but I've been put on this earth to listen to people, whatever their situation, whatever they're going through. I hear people come. I work at the front door of this club, and I feel like I've been put at that position because I'm the first person they see when they come in. And I've had a conversation with people for 20 minutes at the door after they paid to get in and they never made it into the club. And it's 20 minutes and they're telling me things that I'm thinking, wow. And I make a connection with people, and whatever it is that I'm able to give them, or whatever knowledge or wisdom I'm able to offer, I can see that it helps them. And maybe 2 or 3 weeks later, it may be 6 months down the line, a person will come back and say, you know what, we had that conversation, and when you told me that this or try this, I did just that, and do you know that I'm doing so much better now, or my life has changed so tremendously about that. So I say that because, again, I don't know how to title that, but I know when someone's being genuine and when someone needs my ear and my attention and sometimes some advice or some wisdom from me, my duty is to go ahead and, release or offer whatever it is that the Creator is telling me to give them. I don't even think half the time with some of the things that I'm telling people. But, like I said, that's one of my gifts. I also have a gift of song or voice, and I also am just a little bit of a comedian too. So, but that's one of my biggest accomplishments, is to be able to share whatever I've been given to other people.
The things that I would like people to take away from my personal journey is that we're all human, and we're all humans and human beings being human. We're all different, and in my difference, I would hope that people would look at me as a human being who has a heart and a soul and a purpose and a responsibility to my community. And that should be everybody's goal as they become authentic. And the authenticity is a journey for everyone. It doesn't matter if you're transgender, gay, lesbian, bisexual, straight, no matter what religion, no matter what your ethnicity, being authentic is a journey.
I just want you guys, I know that when you look at the LGBT community, the last letter in the community is T. And I know it's because we were added on later on. But don't forget about who we are, because we make up this community as well. And I think a lot of, not only are we shunned by the straight society and the general population, but a lot of times we're shunned by our own community, and it's because they don't recognize and understand the people that we are. Take the time to get to know a girl who's transgender. Have a conversation with her. No one's after you. Just because I'm a transgender female does not mean if I'm having a conversation, or if I'm taking the time out to be genuinely nice to you, doesn't mean I want to sleep with you. It doesn't mean that I'm trying to climb into bed with you. Don't look at me as a freak. Take the time to get to know who I am, because you never know. You might pass up an angel walking down the street because your mind is already closed to the type of person that this girl is. If you see a girl out there and she doesn't seem to be doing well, take the time out to see what you can do to help. Sometimes people just need a helping hand. Sometimes people need someone to talk to. They just need to know that someone cares out there for them. So I just want people to embrace their community and be inclusive of every single person that walks up and down the streets of our community. Because we're already getting bashed by the greater society anyway. If we can't stand up for one another and fight for one another and show that we support and love one another, we can't expect anybody on the outside to give us that respect because we're not respecting ourselves. I stand up for everybody in the community, whether you're bi, lesbian, gay. Of course I'm gonna stand up for the transgender sisters, but I'm here for everyone, everyone. I'm even here for straight people. As long as you're part of our community and that you're showing that, you support us. So I just think we need to embrace one another and love one another.
I'd like to thank our guests today, thank them for their time and sharing those things they were willing to share. And I hope that you return to another episode of Odyssey, and namaste.